The world continues to celebrate International Women's Month, and as part of this, the Motsepe Foundation is hosting a seminar under the theme, What We Need Now for Women and the Youth. The Secretary General of FIFA, Fatima, Samoura, will address the seminar. Our international news editor, Sophie, Mokoena, has more.
Every year during this time, that is March, we commemorate or observe or celebrate International Women's Day. And you know that there are organizations that are committed to ensuring that this does happen. And one of the important organization that is doing that, it is the Motsepe Foundation. You know, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation had a similar event on Sunday where they were commemorating or observing or celebrating International Women's Day. So we are continuing with International Women's Day as part of the build-up to the Commission on Status of Women. Next week, we know at the United Nations, women will gather there, but it will be a hybrid gathering where women will be taking stock of what they have achieved since Beijing. But with me here, I have a founder of Motsepe Foundation, Dr. Moloi-Motsepe, to speak to us because I'm told we have quite a number of guests, and among them we are going to be hearing from the Secretary General of FIFA, you know, Fatima, and the first woman to lead that organization, and we'll be looking at the leadership. Good morning, May. How are you?
Good morning, Osi. I'm very well, thank you.
From Abu Dhabi to South Africa, what were you doing in Abu Dhabi?
We are continuing with our work of ensuring that there is inclusion for women, for young people, for Africa. So in Abu Dhabi, we had taken designers from the continent, east, west, north, south, as well as including some of the designers from UAE and America, and showcasing them at the Forbes International Women's Day celebrations in Abu Dhabi.
Well, these events comes at a very critical time, the war in Ukraine, but women are still trying very hard to ensure that they take their rightful place on the backdrop of the COVID-19 as well. And how has the pandemic affected your work or the foundation's work?
Sophie, I'm so happy that you mentioned that all this celebration happens on the back of wars, climate change issues, COVID, and we know from the COVID pandemic, people that were most impacted by the COVID pandemic were women. 1 in every 4 young girls in South Africa lost a job during the pandemic. And we have unemployment that has affected women who work as domestic workers, women in the retail business, and women in general who have had to go back home to be the caregivers. So with this event, the International Women's Day today, we are hoping to raise awareness around issues of inclusion. Often when we look at economies, we focus on GDP only, but we want to make sure that we can get policymakers to also focus on economic growth and how that impacts on society in general, particularly affecting the poor and the marginalized. Today we have, as you mentioned, Secretary General Fatima Samoura. We want to talk to her about how inclusive sports in general and football in particular is around women. We will also be talking to several speakers from the fall, looking at inclusion of women in the sciences with the 4th Industrial Revolution to ensure that we leave no one behind. It is, I think, for me, very important, and for the foundation, as part of our development agenda, focusing particularly on the poor and the vulnerable, that we make sure that inclusivity is at the center of the work that we do, and the impact that economic growth, for instance, has on women, on young people, and people in rural communities, the poor, the marginalized. That is the focus of the Motsepe Foundation.
And finally, your message to women around the world who are watching what's happening in Ukraine, particularly when you look at women and children.
It is really heartbreaking when you look at the impact of, crises around the world. We saw that firsthand with COVID, the crises that women had gone through. We saw it recently with migrations when young children were lost at sea, drowning, women carrying babies on trees. The impact of crises such as war and, famine, pandemics, bears heavily on women and children. And I'd like to say to women out there, pray for the women who are going through challenges in Ukraine. Be with them. Do whatever you can within your society, within your community, to support other women, particularly those that are going through challenges, the poor and the marginalized.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you for your time. Simpiwe, today we are here and we are hoping to hear from women around the world and in the country in terms of issues that are related to empowerment of women. And this is part of the build-up, as I pointed out, to the CSW. And you know that Shawn Bryce Peace will be reporting on the events next week when the CSW convene, and South Africa is going to chair the Committee on Status of Women at the UN. Back to studio.